We sit in a car outside of our favorite coffee shop, facing the traffic as it passes by, the only place we could agree to meet with our busy schedules. I ask him the most basic question first. What is your name?
My name is Beck Mercury.
Beck's pronouns are he, him. Beck has been my friend for over 5 years now. He has a slim figure, fair skin, and ruffled brown hair with a flurry of red in the front right above his forehead. Beck is a 22-year-old transgender man who has spent his whole life around the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the LDS Church for short. The LDS Church, or as some may know it as, the Mormon Church, is a Christian organization with a controversial past, and public opinion about it is still divided today. Like many Christian religions, the LDS Church has historically been non-supportive of the LGBTQ+ community. And though they have made progress in the area of supporting the gay community in recent years with acts such as supporting a recent bill that would federally recognize same-sex marriages, they still have policies of exclusion against the transgender community. According to the official LDS Church website, some of these policies include not recognizing gender identity, frowning upon socially or physically transitioning, and restricting transgender individuals from participating in church activities or from going to the temple, which requires an approved membership. Much of how the website is worded expresses that they believe being transgender is a struggle that must be overcome. The world thus far has unfortunately not been a welcoming place for the transgender community. And statistics regarding how people view transgender individuals show that things are actually getting worse. According to a survey by the Pew Research Center, in 2017, 54% of U.S. adults believed that gender was determined by sex at birth. And in the last 5 years, this figure has grown to 60%. There has even been a fourfold increase in anti-LGBTQ demonstrations and violence between 2020 and 2021, according to Bloomberg. Clearly, this evidence points to the fact that it is harder than ever to be a transgender person in America today. This begs the question, do Christian churches such as the LDS Church have a role to play in the worsening of these conditions? Considering Beck is a member of the LGBTQ+ community, I was interested in hearing about Beck's experiences with the LDS faith and how that had impacted his own life. Beck grew up in an LDS household and attended church himself for the first 16 years of his life. He was actually homeschooled up until his 8th grade year. This left him with very little contact with anyone that wasn't directly affiliated with the LDS Church. With that in mind, I started off simply by asking Beck if he had ever felt judged by members of the LDS Church, with him responding,
Well, we could go down the list. I think church members are very isolated, and they live in a very small bubble, and anyone who doesn't fit within that particular criteria of people that and things that they've already met and experienced within that bubble are usually met with a lot of fear and discomfort. So I think I've probably been unintentionally judged by a lot of Mormons, where it's not necessarily what they're trying to do, but it still happens. It's people's natural, when you're in that much of a bubble, it's your natural reaction to be uncomfortable with anyone that doesn't fit. I think the bubble is the problem. So,
when I asked him about how the LDS Church had affected his family life, he grew a disappointed look on his face and explained how it feels as though his family lives in their own bubbles separate from him and other views of the world, and he has to fight actively to get his family to look at anything outside of their traditional views. This has left Beck in a tough situation.
So I am actively transitioning while in a Mormon household that is unsupportive. It's getting better. It's very, very slowly. But the basis of my household was built in an unsafe way.
And this will be the case until he makes enough money to move out permanently. He even went on to describe his family's process of thought after a lifetime of being a part of the LDS Church.
Processing new information is so difficult when you are told your entire life that this is what is true, and you don't let anyone else tell you anything differently. You won't ever accept that you're wrong. If you are raised that way and you're taught that way, you become incapable of learning and growing as a human being, and it's really, really damaging.
Beck switched from homeschooling to public school in his 8th grade year, but soon found that the cultural reach of the Mormon Church was much more expansive than just his family. As a child having doubts about the church and wishing to change his gender identity, Beck found himself having to censor himself on a daily basis to avoid being ostracized by his peers. When asked, he explained that this was actually one of the reasons that he delayed his transition for so long, stating,
I didn't feel like I had any like safe place at school to come out, so I do feel like it wasn't intentional by like any one individual person. It's the culture as a whole created a space that was very, very unsafe for me.
This issue persisted throughout high school and even into the beginning of his college career. After his graduation, Beck moved into housing for Brigham Young University, or BYU for short. BYU's infamous honor code has historically been against the rights of the LGBTQ+ community, with it recently revoking the service of voice therapy for transgender individuals. Living there, he felt extremely restricted in living his life and even felt threatened by being his most genuine self. I asked Beck how it felt to be in his situation with BYU housing, with him responding,
I was technically coming out while I was living in BYU housing and like couldn't tell anybody because of if I did, I literally would have been kicked out of my house. So like I almost was homeless because I was breaking the honor code. I just didn't tell anybody.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, Beck elected to move back into his familial home due to financial reasons. However, while living in a home that does not fully understand nor support his gender identity, he still found the courage to start his transition. But there was one question that remained. Though Beck had clearly had a collection of negative experiences due to Mormon culture, a set of cultural expectations and norms created by members of the LDS Church, I asked him whether he thought that not having these experiences and not being raised so close to the LDS organization would have differently affected his progress with his gender identity. His response was,
Oh, 100%. Yes. I knew I wanted to come out when I was 15. I just waited for a really long time. Yeah, I would have. If I had been like born in a different family or in like a more accepting space, yes, definitely. It was the only reason I waited was other people. And it was a long time that I waited solely for the reason of not wanting to inconvenience everybody around me by having to explain my identity to them, because I knew that no one was going to be on my side immediately. Like I knew I would be fighting for my life in every single conversation, and that is how it's been so far. Not with my non-Mormon friends, they're all incredibly supportive and I wouldn't have been able to do it without them, but every single like religious person that I've encountered, it has been it's like climbing a mountain every time I have a conversation.
Despite having to continually deal with judgment from Mormon culture, Beck is now living as his most genuine self, and that is something to be proud of. Unfortunately, Beck is far from the only transgender individual that has had to deal with this sort of treatment, and it is clear that the LDS organization needs to strive to be better and take responsibility. Culture and policies need to change to become more supportive and accepting and less judgmental of minority groups like the trans community. Hopefully someday soon, transgender individuals in Utah like Beck will be able to go through their journey with their heads held high without the weight of judgment or persecution bringing them down. It is up to all of us to make sure that this future is able to come to fruition.